little background about me. I am originally, and up until quite recently, a professor of social psychology and a full-time researcher on motivation. And recently, when I decided to write the book, I did so because for about as long as I can remember since I've been studying motivation, I've been frustrated by the fact that we have about 20, 30, in some cases even 40 years worth of really amazing research in the area of motivational science. Nobody knows about it. The only people who know about it are academics. And of course, what we do as a scientist, when you find some terrific, very useful, very practical finding, you usually then write it up in a journal, which is filled with jargon and totally dry and boring, and nobody reads it except the other handful of experts in your tiny little area. And that's wonderful, and then you sort of call it a day. You're happy if you get it published, but regular people don't ever get to learn about it. And I think even as a grad student, when I first started learning about all of this research that scientific psychologists had done about motivation, I started kind of feeling irritated, like, why hadn't anybody told me this? Would have been really handy to know. There's a lot that's known about how to set goals in ways that make you much more likely to reach them. There's a lot that's known about the kinds of pitfalls that typically derail you when you're pursuing a goal, and they aren't the things that you think they are. There's a lot that's known about the different kinds of strategies that you can use to overcome those pitfalls. And basically, there's a lot that's known about how to kind of stay motivated in the face of difficulty until you eventually succeed and reach your goal. A lot that's known about it, nobody knows about it. So years back, I thought, someday I will try to write something that will kind of let people know about this. And this book is really a first attempt to do that. I have about 40 years worth of stuff to write about, so I'm going to be at this for a while, hopefully. But this is the first pass at kind of taking some of this research, putting it in plain English, and hoping that people can actually use it in their everyday lives. So today, what I want to talk about, I kind of tried to take a few of the things that I talk about in the book that I think may be the most useful for people in a workplace environment, and talk about those. We're going to start by talking a little bit about setting goals. And I think everybody in this room knows that goals are a good thing and that we should be setting them for ourselves, but you probably don't know why it's so important to actually take the things that we wish would happen or hope would happen or would find desirable and actually turn them into concrete goals. And that actually has to do with the way your brain is wired. So we'll start by talking about that and how you can actually set goals in ways that make you actually much more likely to achieve them. That's the first part, relatively short part. What I really want to get into then is the different ways in which people will approach what seems to be the same goal. Often you have a kind of a dominant motivation, especially in one domain, like at work. Maybe you think of most of your goals at work in a particular way. So we're going to try to identify for you what your dominant way of thinking, your dominant motivation is. And then that will help you to understand where your weaknesses will be, where your strengths are, and how you can capitalize on them, and what will work best for you strategically as you kind of go about your day. What kinds of things work for you, what kinds of things don't. And maybe some of this you already knew, but you didn't know why. You didn't know why some things just don't feel right to you, and some things feel great. And now you'll know why. And just as important, I think, as understanding yourself in any work environment is understanding your colleagues. Right? Because invariably we work in teams, right? So you have people you have to work with on a project to get it done. You have people you report to. You have people who report to you. And they probably are not all motivated in exactly the same way you are. So in order to communicate well and to collaborate well, you need to be able to figure out how the people around you are motivated and be able to talk to them sort of in their language. Why do we set goals? Goals are outcomes that you've decided you're going to make happen, right? And the minute you do that, there are parts of your brain that become activated that totally don't care about wishes and desires. They care only about goals. There's a motivational hardwiring, basically, in your brain that starts lighting up when you've decided this is something that I'm going to accomplish. I am going to get this done this year. I'm going to get this great evaluation. I'm going to get this promotion. I'm going to lose 20 pounds, whatever it is, right? Once you've decided this is something I'm going to do, your brain treats that piece of information very, very differently. And the great thing about the fact that it treats it differently is that those motivational hardwiring systems in your brain are awesome. I mean, they do amazing things, and most of the time, they work completely without your awareness. The vast majority of the actions you take in order to achieve the goals you have in your life are happening below your conscious awareness. Your brain is constantly scanning the environment for opportunities to act on those goals. It's making decisions about which behaviors to take in order to reach those goals, and you don't really even know that it's happening. Study after study after study after study shows that when people set themselves more difficult goals, goals that actually will require, okay, I'm going to have to put some effort, I'm really going to have to work on this, they outperform people who set themselves easy goals by orders of magnitude. Part of the problem is that nobody, okay, not never, but it's very, very rare for somebody to accidentally outperform their goal. It almost never happens. When I was a professor, I would sometimes set myself goals like, okay, this year I'd like to make sure that I get 2 articles published in journals. I promise you that in no year that I ever set the goal of publishing 2 articles did I ever publish 3. It doesn't happen. Part of the reason it doesn't happen is that once you've actually reached that goal that you've set for yourself, your brain says, and sometimes you even consciously say to yourself, all right, whew, done with that. Because we all have lots of goals on our plates, right? So it's like, okay, well, done there, now I can go work on this other stuff. And that's great. But it means that you're never going to get beyond the goals you set for yourself, right? It just almost never happens. If you settle for something that'll be easy as a goal, something that you know you can do in your sleep, that's all you're going to do. So it turns out, human beings work much, much better when we're actually pushing ourselves. Now, you don't want to choose something that's impossible. It has to be attainable, but more challenging. And once you set that more challenging goal for yourself, a whole bunch of things, again, largely without your awareness, start happening, right? Your brain starts mobilizing resources, self-control, effort, attention, gets focused on this goal that you've set for yourself because your brain knows this is going to be tough. This is going to be something that's really going to take a lot out of me. I'm really going to have to focus on this. So setting yourself difficult goals isn't just kind of like this cute, motivating thing. It's actually an incredibly powerful tool. So when you set goals for yourself, you need to be clear about what you want, be specific about what success will look like, and then really ask yourself, could I do more? Right? Am I really pushing myself here? Am I capable of more than this? And then go for that. Promotion focus and prevention focus. There are 2 ways people typically think about, again, the very same goal. When you're a promotion-focused person, you're focused on gain and advancement. You think about your goals in sort of ideal terms, like ideally I would like this to happen. Ideally I would like to be really successful at this because that would just be fantastic for me. And you think about, when you approach your job, you approach it with what psychologists call, this might sound a little corny, but the motivation feels kind of like eagerness. Right? Like I'm going to just knock this out of the park, right? I'm going to really, really tackle this and I'm going to do a fantastic job. That feels like eagerness. When it works, you feel joyful, psyched, right? It's like, woo, I'm awesome. You feel terrific. When it doesn't work, you tend to feel more depressed, dejected, bummed out. Prevention-focused people, on the other hand, because they're running around trying to make sure that they don't make any mistakes and don't lose anything that they've worked so hard to gain, they tend to run around feeling mostly anxious, anticipating that things are not going to go well for them. And the motivation feels like vigilance, right? You're kind of constantly looking for, okay, what could go wrong? How could this burn me? What do I need to do? Am I dropping any of the apples? Do I have all the apples? Am I juggling everything correctly? That's what it feels like to be a prevention-focused person. So when things go wrong, you feel really anxious, really, really anxious, terrified. And when things go well, you actually feel more relief. Prevention-focused people tend to not go, woo, when things go right. They tend to go like, oh, thank God. Like, that's over. Still feels great, by the way. Relief is a fantastic emotion. It's really, I enjoy it. But it's not that sort of high energy psychness that promotion-focused people tend to feel. Promotion-focused people and prevention-focused people are equally effective. They're just differently effective. They have different strengths and different weaknesses. Okay? So if you are a prevention-focused person, which incidentally I am, don't feel bad. We can be very successful too. We just approach our goals in a very, very different way. We find in study after study that when people think about what they're doing in terms of making progress, right, in terms of getting better, in terms of improvement, they are resilient in the face of difficulty. Their self-esteem doesn't suffer when things get hard. They keep working. They are less affected by whether or not they believe they can succeed. Right? So even if they think, I don't know if I'm going to pull this off, oh well, I'm learning, that's great. Now I know that sounds a little bit, again, I know this is a real workplace, and you have real deadlines, and there are real consequences for your actions. And I know that for most people, they feel like the work environment itself dictates that you think this way, right? Because I have to do well, right? I have to succeed in order to save my job, to advance. So I have to focus on being good. What I'm saying is, even though I realize that the consequences of your actions matter and that you all have real deadlines and you all have people that you are accountable to, you still can think, you personally, can think about what you're doing in terms of making progress. You still can think about what you're doing in terms of development, cutting yourself some slack, allowing yourself to make mistakes when you're doing something that's new and difficult, understanding that it's about improvement, it's about getting better. So even when your boss is annoyed with you that you screwed something out, you still have the power to think about what you're doing as a trajectory, right? As a learning curve, as progress, as about making progress. People who think this way are more successful than people who think this way. The most successful people manage to find a way to think about what they're doing, even with all the pressures of their work environment, to think about, you personally think about what you're doing in these terms. And it's extremely useful. And if you want to know more about this, because I don't have time to talk more about this, it's chapter 3 in the book. So you can do that. Everybody make sure you have a copy before you leave, and I hope you enjoy it.
And the good news is that once you actually figure out how you're motivated and how the people around you are motivated, then it doesn't have to be about butting heads and creating friction. It can just be about appreciating each other's strengths and weaknesses and talking to each other in language that they can actually really understand.